New episodes of the I Know You Didn't Ask podcast are out every Monday and Friday, available wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Welcome to I Know You Didn't Ask. I'm your host, Megan O'Donnell, and did you guys hear my two-part BravoCon recap episode? If you are only watching the East Coast shows, then head over to part 1. And if you're only watching the West Coast shows, head over to part 2. And if you're watching everything like me, like a true fucking loser, be sure to just check out both parts. Tell a friend. I submit a ad on Facebook. I'm looking for boomers to listen to these episodes. I've never done an ad, and it's probably going to amount to nothing, but it was $25 whole, so I'm crossing my fingers and my toes that hopefully more people check that episode out. But if you haven't listened, be sure to check that out, and be sure to subscribe to this here show. You could subscribe on Apple, you could subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you can listen or watch things. I am there. I'm looking particularly cute today. I'm in a Madewell cozy little sweater, just wearing some wool for the holiday season. I feel like it's time to really bring out my wool outerwear. Today's episode is all about Bravo news. We're going to talk about Porsha's flight issue, Wendy Osefo's credit card drama, Kandi Burruss's breakup, the break-ins at Sutton and Kathy's house, and we will end with a little bit of Shah news because she's coming home for Christmas, you guys. She's going to have the opportunity to lay out cookies and milk for Santa, which, as I'm thinking in real time, I believe she's Muslim, so she's probably not going to be doing that regardless. She will be home for the holiday season. There's a lot to get into, and be sure to tune into Monday's episode as well, because that is going to be a pop culture banger. We're talking about Kim Kardashian's elephant Birkin, the Bezos bankrolling the Met Gala. Just wait until you hear my monologue. The Eddie Murphy documentary, some Ken Burns documentary conversation. I did get to meet the guy. I did get to meet and greet him. And then we're obviously going to have to be talking about the sick shit happening in the secret lives of Mormon wives. Like, you're not kidding. There really are secret lives behind the scenes that we don't know about. And the fruity pebbles of it all, we cannot get into it today, people. I cannot get into what Demi and her husband do behind closed doors before the Thanksgiving holiday. I don't want to make your ears bleed before the Thanksgiving break. I mean, let us all be thankful for many, many things in our life. And I'm very thankful for all of you for listening week over week and hopefully telling a friend or two. Send this episode to a friend. That's what's something I would be incredibly grateful for, because we're growing, people. I'm taking headshots on Sunday, so all day Friday and all day Saturday, I'm just going to be not eating, attempting to look svelte, hot yoga, hot Pilates. I just need to be sweating out every orifice to look really good in those headshots. So be sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Megan the Podcaster, and you'll be able to see my gorgeous headshots. They better be gorgeous. I swear to Christ. If they are not looking good, if I'm not looking good, then I'm going to be a real big baby about it. But anyways, let's move on to people who are doing very well in their life. Jenna Lyons, as we know, and I mentioned it briefly on the BravoCon recap, is not going to be coming back for season 16 of The Real Housewives of New York. She did say she was asked to be a friend of and wasn't going to even be considered a full-time cast member because she was pretty much unwilling to show her personal life and her relationship. Shocking development that somebody would actually choose their relationship over fame and being on the show. It's pretty impressive. And as I've always obsessively talked about, I'm obsessed with Cass Bird, her wife, who's a major photographer director. And I was up for a job to be a producer at the company she is represented by, but they rejected me. So if you're watching video, you'd see me flip 2 birds off at that company, which I don't even want to work for them. Fuck that. I can't go back to corporate, hun. That's not me. It's not me, but it's Jenna. Jenna is going to be the executive creative director at FundamentalCo. Doesn't really roll off the tongue, which spun out of Blackstone in 2024. So let's just say big budget projects. The company itself is a brand consulting firm that is going to cater to private equity firms and their portfolio companies. And she's going to be the creative director. So obviously, like, guiding where these major brands like Bain Capital, Visa, and Hilton are going with their advertising campaigns. So pretty major. Go off, girl. I'm very impressed, as per usual. In her Instagram post about not coming back for season 16, she said, I will be watching and bitching from the sidelines with love and outfit judgment. Of course, that is what she's known for. I mean, never forget the moment when Jessel tried on that like turquoise green piece of lingerie and just like shit on it for like 15 hours. And like the amount of footage that they had of Jessel complaining about the lingerie was hilarious. And I understood her perspective because she just had these two twins. She's still not comfortable with her body. Now she's wearing lingerie on television, and all of these other girls are size zeros, perfect body. Like Erin had a baby, and like the next day she's like in a bikini, and she's like, still have my baby weight. I'm like, is the baby weight in the photo? Because I'm not seeing it. So I could understand also like being upset about like having to like wear what she felt was unflattering lingerie on, you know, national television, but also like being like a big brat about it to Jenna was very rude. Again, Jessel's my favorite, so she can do no wrong. As you know, I make exceptions for housewives who I like. They can do no wrong, and even if they did wrong, I would still find a way to talk myself out of thinking that I should be hating them. It's really healthy. I will say she does say, I love my girls. She names all the other ladies on the cast and then also leaves out Brynn. Again, I was talking about how she was noticeably absent from BravoCon, obviously. And it really just seems like she's been fully written off by the entire cast, which is sad because you know, you don't want to be like the one girl who's been fully outcasted, but after the end of season 15, it was like clear as day that like Brynn lost the trust of her castmates as well as all the viewers, as well as production. Good riddance, honey. One of my biggest regrets in life was not going to Jenna Lyons' stoop sale last year. She was selling lots of different pieces that she owns, which like I feel like her pieces are like museum quality. She was selling like a pair of Jimmy Choos for $20, and God knows we're not the same clothing or shoe size, but I feel like I would have really scored with the accessories, fun sunglasses, costume jewelry, bags. What I would have done to touch her bags, even just to touch them, not even to buy them. That's how sad and pathetic I am. I've always looked back at that choice to not go to the stoop sale as one of my top 5 biggest regrets. And I don't have that many regrets, but this is one of them. I'm very happy for you. Good luck on your new job. We will always be here if you decide to come back to Real Housewives of New York season 27. Whenever you want to come back, we will be here for you. And maybe just come back for like a little party. Like, would love to see her at a little party with the ladies. You know, kind of like a Camille Grammer, Adrienne Maloof. She's always floating around. Like, you don't have to be in the drama. You don't have to show us your life. But I do just want to see you. I want to see you from afar. Let's pivot a little bit to Porsha Williams from the Real Housewives of Atlanta, who got into a little tiff on a Delta flight Sunday the 16th. She was leaving BravoCon and had, you know, of course, like posted a selfie of herself being like, I love my life. I found myself again. Things are so freaking good. She ends up getting into an altercation on this flight. So supposedly Porsha was listening to videos on her phone with the volume up before the plane took off from Vegas back to Atlanta. And the passenger next to her asked her in a condescending way if she had planned to listen to the IG video the entire flight. And of course, that, you know, sparks up a conversation. And then, you know, Porsha is then like, well, I don't like the way you asked me to lower this. And then the woman's like, wait, don't put this on me. And there's body cam footage from both of their conversations with the law enforcement who like apprehended Porsha once she exited the plane. And supposedly then they were going back and forth. Porsha was calling the woman crazy. Porsha then like knocked the woman's phone out of her hand, supposedly. There's a lot of he said, she said. So at this point, Porsha has been fully cleared of all of the allegations that she was involved in any kind of physical altercation with this woman on the plane. And I mean, she was giving Karen 101. She was saying all the greatest hits. I'm, quote, afraid for my life. And then, quote, did you give my information to the perpetrator of this abuse? Because I'm afraid she's going to have me killed. What makes you think a woman who is just playing Instagram videos loudly on a plane is going to now put a hit out for your life? You silly, silly Karen. I will say, it seems like this escalated very quickly, and even witnesses said like, you know, the older lady was like yelling at Porsha and like was getting in her face, and I guess it was like giving her the middle finger, and then she was like being very loud and chaotic, and then also, you know, another witness came in and said like Porsha did like point in her face, and for some reason like once she started pointing and like getting heated herself, then the other woman like really kind of escalated the situation and was like, don't talk to me like that, and the two of them just were going at it. But Porsha, my girl, I want to always stand up for you in all your times of, you know, legal issues. Like, remember she got arrested a couple years ago for like fighting for Breonna Taylor. Like, I stand for that. But any person on the flight, even if you are a real housewife, should know the basic rules of being on an airplane, which is you do not have your phone, your iPad, your computer, anything playing without headphones. Like, what are you doing, Porsha? Don't you have like a spatial awareness to know maybe everyone around me can hear this? And the woman was like, the context she was watching was very, very loud. So maybe she was like watching BravoCon footage like from the amazing weekend she just had. So I do have to say, Porsha, you should know better. You should always have a pair of headphones with you, especially on a cross-country flight. But of course, this woman, then escalating into a point of like, I need the FBI involved and I'm fearing for my life, that's like where it's taken too far. But Porsha, yeah, you gotta learn that for next time. Get those like nice, big, fancy Apple headphones. Everybody has them. They're the hot new item. Maybe you could pick them up on Black Friday. Maybe you'll get a good deal because you know what? That is also a big no-no for me. Speaking of BravoCon, we had 2 break-ins during BravoCon. We again touched on this a little bit on the 2-parter episode. Again, I'm gonna keep telling you to listen until you fucking do. But Sutton Strack's Beverly Hills home was burglarized through a kitchen window while she was at BravoCon, and she's confirmed that luxury handbags and fine jewelry were stolen, and that is like so devastating. I feel like handbags or whatever, I'm guessing like her bags probably are like over $10,000 for some of these like Hermes like specialty pieces. But I feel like the fine jewelry would have really stung. Like, you're going to take diamonds from me? As you guys know, I have 1 diamond. Actually, I have 2. One was a gift. Both were gifts. One was for my aunt and one's my engagement ring. But, like, if either of those were taken from me, it would be devastating. So I only imagine, like, my broke ass only has 2 diamond things ever. She probably has, like, 1,000 different diamond pieces. And all of that being taken from you is so sad. Oh my God. And I know it's like trivial because like people are dying, Kim, but like you still like have attachment to items. Like she's not like a Buddhist with like, no attachments to any material items. But oh my God, the jewelry, that would have been so shitty. Oh. So I guess the incident was reported around 2 p.m. after Sutton Strack's dog walker had called 911 once they saw that the window in the kitchen had been broken. And this reminded me of the dog walker situation with Lady Gaga. Do you guys remember that? When her dog walker was shot and the assailant ended up stealing her 2 Frenchies? That was crazy. That was so wild. Thank God he was okay and the dogs were also safely returned. But I don't know, these dog walkers, they do so much for these fancy Los Angeles residents. And, thank God they were there and were able to, call 911 and let them know that there had been a robbery. Kathy Hilton, friend of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, also reported that 3 intruders reportedly entered their Bel Air home while her husband Rick Hilton was there, but the burglars fled before the police arrived. So thankfully nothing was taken. But still, it's so scary, and it's a risk of putting yourself out there and having people monitor your lives. These are clearly targeted attacks because the perpetrators knew that the 2 of them had been out of town for BravoCon. Maybe they're Bravo fans. You never know who's watching Bravo. But there are bad people in this world who are planning out and checking on where you are and striking when the iron's hot. And it just happens to be during these really busy weekends when they kind of know at least you're not going to be in the house. At least Kathy has Rick to go home with and to have someone to keep her safe while they deal with the aftermath and uncertainty of being robbed. But Sutton like goes home to nobody except the dog. So I feel bad for her. So I wonder, if we'll see her moving eventually on one of the upcoming seasons. And we can't forget that Beverly Hills has had a lot of burglaries in the past few years. 2017, Kyle and her family lost about $1 million in valuables, including family heirlooms, while they were in Aspen for the holidays. And so, they probably saw, and like I said, we're planning and striking and checking up on her socials to make sure to see, okay, every single person in her family is in Aspen with her. Let's strike while the iron's hot. Back in October of 2021, Dorit was also held at gunpoint during a home invasion at her home in Encino. That was an entirely different situation because, of course, she was home, but her husband wasn't home. So maybe these people had been kind of tracking PK's whereabouts because God knows the guy's on stories and posting a bunch. But, who knows if that was real or fake. There was all of that drama. But for me, it's like you could see like the PTSD she went through post break-ins, so you can't deny that it really had a massive impact on her. And then even earlier this year, former cast member Teddy Mellencamp's home was also targeted. So it seems like there's some shit going on in Los Angeles with these robberies, and that's where the OG bling ring was. Like, never forget that incredible saga. Oh God. Again, I don't like want people to be robbed, but if you are going to be robbed, I want you to be robbed by like hot young people who like just want to wear the same clothes that Rachel Bilson does. Like, they're not as, you know, scary as like the Louvre robbers or these people who are like doing a targeted attack. These were just like kids on drugs who were like, let's like go knock on Misha Barton's door. But actually they were planning and plotting their attacks based on like what Perez Hilton was posting. So if Perez Hilton would post Misha Barton in New York, they'd rob her house in Los Angeles. So, you know, I guess, you know, that's always kind of been the way it goes. Speaking of fake break-ins, Wendy Osefo from Potomac, the queen of segues, is back, people, and I'm just so proud to have that self-proclaimed title. But you have to see, like, if Wendy was also robbed, like these other ladies, wouldn't she have had some kind of like emotional arc in her storyline last season or this season, where she was talking about the, you know, aftermath of being robbed and having all of these things taken from her, I believe over $400,000. It's odd that it never really was brought up, but there are new allegations as to what what Wendy and Eddie have been up to. And if you guys don't really know the lore of what originally happened with her insurance fraud claims, go back a couple weeks ago and check out my Wendy Osefo deep dive. Again, if I don't brag about myself, no one's gonna. So go check out that incredible episode. But Wendy and her husband Eddie have now been accused of having over 40 credit cards under various different names and aliases. So supposedly they used some aliases, including Pam Oliver and Eddie Hennessy. And I feel like Eddie is not just happy Eddie, he's also sloppy Eddie, because he keeps doing very clear things that incriminate him. Again, go back and listen to the Wendy and Eddie deep dive episode, because you'll really hear all of like the nitty gritty about what we know so far about Eddie and Wendy's current insurance fraud claims and all the sloppy mistakes that he made while he's trying to, you know, hoodwink these insurance companies and the law. Eddie Hennessy, I mean, I can't imagine that's your birth name, right? The prosecution ended up claiming that the aliases and fake company names were actually used to kind of mask their identity, since they're high profile people in their town and they don't want people knowing where they live or targeting them. But they use the real image of their home on their nationally viewed television show. So I don't think Eddie Hennessy is really going to, you know, derail people from finding out where you live if they really care about knowing where you live. Also, the name Eddie and Wendy Osefo is not like a name that like everybody would recognize. It's not Jennifer Aniston or Denzel Washington. Like, those are names that might like tip off a UPS driver or whomever you're implying will be seeing your address on packages and doing something nefarious with it. But, you know, you guys are kind of nobodies. So like, I wouldn't really worry. But I guess, you know, when they see Eddie Hennessy, they're like, oh, I've never heard of that name. I'm not going to target this fool. So the state is actually saying that such documentation of these additional 40 credit cards made out to them personally as well as to their businesses, again, just shows like a pattern of excessive spending, which also supports now a motive in this case, because you need to have these insurance claims to get all this money back to pay your debt because of your excessive spending. And as I mentioned in that deep dive episode, again, I am like a fucking broken record today, but in that episode, we talk about how both of them grew up in Nigerian American households where, you know, in their culture, it's so important to have the most beautiful house and have the most beautiful cars and, you know, live very lavishly and have all of these material items that then symbolize your wealth and power in society. But again, it's all bullshit if it's like built on lies and fraud. So, you know, you have to start doing whatever it takes to live the life that you think you deserve. And in their case, it's, you know, doing fraudulent actions, which is sad, you know, given like how impressive they are as a couple and, you know, all of the flowers that we give to them. But, you know, at the end of the day, again, innocent until proven guilty, and they've been coming out with press releases saying like, there was like an extreme bias against our family. There were clear signs of a break-in, and yet the police kind of failed to investigate the initial burglary. But it's like, where are the signs of break-in? Because the footage didn't show anybody breaking in. There was no ADT alarm record of any kind of forced entry. I feel like they're trying to defend themselves, which is absolutely normal, but it's like the writing's on the wall that all of these things seemed to have been investigated and are still kind of showing up like it was kind of bullshit. In this press release, they also have the quote, "It is ironic for the state to assert or exaggerate the existence or any purported debt in connection with the accomplished professional couple." Like, what's ironic about that? Where's the irony? It's like very obvious and a tale as old as time that people would, go into massive amounts of debt to exaggerate, their accomplishments in their professional lives that, would imply that they have all this money because of all these degrees. It's just kind of bullshit. I mean, 40 credit cards, that is so dark. Again, the two of them showed up at BravoCon, pretending like nothing was going on. So again, innocent until proven guilty. I will stay waiting for updates, which we will actually get very soon because the couple is actually due in court on December 2nd. So this time next week, we should have some updates on what's the latest going on in the Eddie and Wendy Osefo situation. Okay, let's jump into Kandi Burruss from the Real Housewives of Atlanta's shocking breakup news. I mean, it's shocking because it just came out of nowhere, so it was shocking, but not shocking that they are ending up not together in general. So the two met back in 2011 and they ended up tying the knot in 2014. So they've been married for 11 years. That's a pretty good run. And they have been split up since July, and she's actually asking him for both child support as well as joint custody of their two biological children that they have together. Ace, who is now 9, and Blaze, who is 6. And of course, she talked about her breakup on her Amazon Live. She's like selling toaster ovens. Then she's like, "Everybody, I gotta let you know what's going on. What's the latest?" And she basically was like, they've been hurtling towards a divorce for a while. She says she's kind of going through the waves of emotion. She said, obviously going through a divorce is definitely not the easiest thing. Sometimes you're cool. Then sometimes you have your moments of sadness. Of course, normal. And, she was like, all the times you've been seeing me online, all smile means nothing. I've been going through it for a while. Life has been lifing me. And it makes me feel sad. And I think we see it all the time. This like picture perfect life on Instagram, like actually is like predicated on a bunch of lies and bullshit. And so, what you see on social media isn't really real. And this is just another example of it. And I think we all kind of saw this coming from a mile away. I mean, I hate to say Mama Joyce said, "I told you so," but Mama Joyce is like so excited because she might have the opportunity to move back into the main house with Kandi. She's like, "Todd, you can stay in the little sidecar house and I'll be back in the main house where I'm supposed to fucking be." I mean, Kandi's mom and aunt, shout out to Aunt Bertha when she did this chair swivel out of there saying like, "This is some bullshit." They knew from the jump that he was a schemer, that he was a little shady. And I always kind of believed that they met and fell in love in a real, genuine way. And I still believe that because I think it's not fair that people keep saying, like, "Oh, he was using her for her money," because can't you say that about every guy that could possibly want to be with her? Like, he was working when they met. Like, he was in production. That's how they met on, I believe, the trip to South Africa. He was working there. So, she met another professional person. I think the problem with Todd was that he stopped doing production once they got together and he became like her little lackey and her business partner. It's like not all fun and games in business when like you have no money of your own to put into these businesses and it's all money that Kandi's made. And of course that grows resentment, and especially like with a weak man like him, like for years and years and years, you would hear him talking about how he was upset and resentful of her because, if they have a business endeavor together, people say, "Oh, Kandi Burruss and husband Todd, whatever," rather than like, "Oh, Todd Tucker's new restaurant." Like all the restaurants he opened and all the flop businesses that just like wasted their time and money. Like he could have just stayed in production, take a job every few months. Like you don't have to work full time because obviously, your wife is making bank. Watch your children, be with your family, help watch her money grow. Like instead, he just wasted her money, started all these business that all fucking flopped. If you guys are interested in listening to my old lady gang menu recap, go back and listen. I'm going to probably have to go back and listen to that too. And honestly, at that episode, I probably was talking about how I'm shocked that they're still together. I feel like I probably was calling it then as well. But honestly, he was always a bit of a sketchy character. And like I said, like it's not fair to say like, oh, just because she's rich means every man she's going to be with is going to take advantage of her. I don't think that's true. But I do think he was a bit opportunistic and he knew what he was getting with a girl like Kandi. And again, rather than like staying in his own lane and like starting and building his own stuff, like he always was needing to like start businesses with Kandi because he needed her capital as well as just like the cachet of her name and what that brings to the table. But, he was always doing shady, weird things. He was always in the strip clubs. They were always like bringing in thirds. And like there was this moment like that I remember where it was like Peter and Greg and Todd all chilling and hanging out, and they were talking about like who they would each like hook up with out of the other housewives. And like he mentioned Portia's name like many, many times. And so I'm really hoping that he doesn't go down the same path as like some of the other guys where it's like he starts going on Nene Leakes' podcast and then he gets lunch with Kenya Moore and then he starts hanging out with Drew Sidora and goes into the studio with her to make music. Like I hope he just like leaves her alone. Like that one new like Instagram video thing where it's like that girl being like, "Scram, get out of here." That's how I feel about Todd. Like I hope he just leaves her alone, but he is so desperate for attention that I don't think he's going to leave her alone. And I hope he just doesn't weasel his way back into the, Bravo world. Even like fucking Apollo. Like, leave Phaedra alone. Like, what are you doing on Married to Medicine? In their situation, they had years of being on television together, where of course eagle-eyed fans can find footage of them like having like contentious moments between the two of them. But they also had like YouTube videos. And I just believe a general rule of thumb should be couples should not have YouTube channels because there's so much incriminating information that you can like easily access. And I was watching one video that I saw that was reposted onto TikTok, and it was Kandi and Todd talking while she was getting glam, and he was talking about like, oh, when people break up, like where Kandi was basically like, oh, well, if people break up, I don't think that the man should take all the things from the woman that she built. And he's like, yeah, but like, what if the guy helped her blow up? And if it wasn't for him, he would have had, and like, you could tell like they were just like talking about their own situation, but pretending like they weren't. They were talking about like other outsiders. And obviously, like, Kandi speaks from her own perspective and Todd speaks from his perspective, and Kandi makes the money and Todd spends the money. So, like, everything that they were saying was about themselves. But they were just like, our friends, like our friend who has a lot of money and marries like a freeloader guy. Like, what would our friend do? It's like, well, she's going to screw you. And he did sign an ironclad prenup. Thank God she had some great lawyers on her team back then, where she was basically saying, like, you gave up your right for alimony. I'm not paying you a lump sum alimony. I'm not paying your attorney's fees. I'm not paying any litigation expenses. And, we'll have an equitable distribution of any property that we own together. Like, it's done. You're not getting a fucking dollar from me. The fact that she's coming back and saying, like, oh, I want child support from you and, we're going to have joint custody is, like, pretty badass. Like, she doesn't need his money, but it's like, still give me fucking money. You gave me 2 kids. Now you're going to be fucking paying for their, school and, crayons and shit. Okay, you guys, speaking of mothers who will be reunited with their children soon enough, Jen Shah is coming out of prison early. So she was originally sentenced to 78 months in prison, but her sentence was actually slashed because of good behavior. So she is going to end up being in prison just for about 33 months. Jen Shah will be out of prison on December 10th. She got out because of good behavior. And I mean, it's great that she's behaving well in prison because she didn't really behave well outside of prison. And if you guys forgot, Jen actually pled guilty to wire fraud because she had created a multi-million-dollar scheme that duped thousands of victims, many of them old senior citizens. So again, she was very aware of what she was doing, and she was the owner of this company. So she created the scheme, she created the scam, and I never want to see her on my fucking screen ever again. And I'm just ready for her to like no longer be in the Bravo sphere. She's such a fame whore and so desperate for attention. She's going to really expect a snowflake the moment she gets back, but it's not going to really work that way. And I have a feeling we're going to get like a TikTok very soon after she comes home where it's like Jen and Monica, and where it's like, I wake in the morning and I step outside and I take a deep breath, and then like they turn and then it's like, bitches ain't shit. I feel like that's going to be Jen and Monica in 3 weeks. Like they are absolutely planning to do that. Jen is already memorizing the lyrics, and Jen will obviously be the second person in that video. So it's like, oh my God, grand reveal. I just like can't stand Jen Shah. And Andy Cohen even has said during a Watch What Happens live taping that, quote, Jen Shah, I never want to see again. So I can't really think that she's going to be having an opportunity to get back onto Bravo. And I actually came across a really great article in Variety by an author named Kate Arthur, who was interviewing Frances Berkwick, who's the chairman of Bravo and Peacock Unscripted. And they had a great Q&A that I'm going to kind of go into now. But one of the questions that the interviewer asked her was, Jen Shah, are her crimes forgivable? She was saying right before that she can forgive someone like Karen Huger because she thinks what Karen went through was different, because she feels like Karen is going to be able to take what she went through and hopefully grow and learn as a person. But again, like Jen created the problem herself. Karen just drunk drove. Again, both unsafe and bad, but Jen was scheming people, elderly people, for years out of tens of thousands of dollars. So, it's apples and oranges when you look at how the network and how the public reacts to your wrongdoings. And we'll see where Wendy falls into this as well, because if she is proven to be guilty of these crimes, they were self-inflicted. And you knew you were scamming insurance companies, and you knew you were faking a break-in. You waste government money and you waste government resources and you wasted all this time and you did all this shit just so that you can get, $400,000. Like, bitch, get a job. Like, you're famous adjacent. Like, you can make money in other ways. You don't need to be scamming. So in that article with Variety, she kind of goes into a lot of different and interesting information that I found interesting. But she was saying that Peacock has 41 million subscribers, which is kind of crazy. She says it's an extraordinarily young audience, with 50% of their viewers being less than 30, which is why a show like Love Island did very well, and which is why shows like The Valley and Next Gen NYC are also doing very well on Peacock, because they are catering to a younger audience who might not care about the Housewives. And of course, the Housewives are all on Peacock as well, and people are able to like easily access, their episodes on Peacock. And one of the things I thought was really interesting in this article was that she was talking about Bethany Frankel's reality reckoning. And she basically mentions, there had not been any sort of sea of change as a result of this reality reckoning that came up. She said we were doing the right thing from the jump, so there wasn't really much to change in terms of like how our productions are handled and how our editing is handled. I will say I do find it a little exploitative that there isn't any kickback for these housewives who have their shows now on Peacock and on these streaming sites, because, some of them will say like, oh, I made $8,000 my first year, whatever. And now 20 years later, like, we're still rewatching some of those shows and loving them, and new fans are emerging every single day, and so those housewives like don't get any kickback from the shows that are now on the streamers. I do find that to be a little bit unfair. Like, I feel like there should be some slight compensation for like the continued use of their likeness on these shows that people are watching year over year. Like, I have an annual rewatch of RHONY, and like to know that like Sonia Morgan doesn't sniff a penny from that is sad, it's really depressing. She also said Real Housewives of Salt Lake City is doing so well right now because all of the different women have such different lives, and they're also all prepared to be very vulnerable and show those lives. And then they also have a great sense of humor, so they could take the piss out of themselves a little bit. And that kind of leads us to Real Housewives of New York. And she was saying, in terms of the learnings of the reboot of New York, when you watch Olympic skating and someone falls, and then it suddenly makes you realize what they are doing is incredibly difficult. We don't always nail a cast. Sometimes you get a cast like Salt Lake City that has a magical alchemy, but we don't always get it right. The first season of the reboot of The Housewives was actually really great, but second season went, to shit. And she said, they're trying to find the right mix of people who naturally get along together, but who are also very vulnerable and who will also be authentic to themselves, as well as the most important thing is not being self-conscious on camera or having any kind of agenda. And they also don't want somebody who is trying to like overtly build a business and a brand or look for clout. Like, you need to kind of find this perfect person, and that's why it's taking a little bit of more time to find the perfect Real Housewife of New York cast. And you know what, I do agree, and Andy even said this about Atlanta. He was like, we took a bit of time between seasons when they kind of did their cast shakeup a couple of years ago, because he's like, we needed to take the proper time to really figure out who's missing and the kind of show we want to create. And that does take time. So for New York and for New Jersey, I'd rather them take the time to really nail these great casts and, you know, the stories that they want to tell, versus than rushing something and giving us a season 2 of New York again, where it's like, what is happening here? Like, what in the holy hell is happening? Which, speaking of, I feel like I should rewatch season 2 just because I'm a sick fuck. Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. I was going to talk about Megan King Edmonds. I always call her Megan King Eggmans, but I guess she's just Megan King now. She did lose custody of her children, but we're going to get into that. I totally forgot to write that in the outline, but we'll get into that next week. We have a great slew of episodes next week. Again, as I mentioned, tune in to Netflix Unknown Caller. It is fucking crazy, and I'm going into that and more on next week's Freaky Friday episode, because that documentary only touched the surface of what was really going on. There's so much more, so be sure to tune into that. Monday's episode will be all about pop culture, as I mentioned, a couple fun topics up front, but, you know, of course I'm going to be getting into the fucking secret lives of Mormon wives. What the fuck is going on? I'm never going to be able to look at Fruity Pebbles the same way, like, ever in my life. But thank you so much for listening to I Know You Didn't Ask, and thank you so much just for being here week over week. I keep seeing numbers grow, and it's so exciting. And I'm on YouTube and Spotify, and so you can watch these videos too if that's like what you prefer. And I'm just so grateful and excited that you guys continue to listen and comment and say really kind things, because that just gives me more confidence to keep going. And you all know me, I am a quitter. So if I don't get any more compliments, this can all go away very quickly. Well, thanks for listening. Have a great Thanksgiving, and let me know what you think about all these Bravo episodes. This has been a very fun week, but I'm also very excited to pivot away from Bravo next week because, girl, I gotta fucking breathe a little bit. All right, have a great week. Bye. New episodes of the I Know You Didn't Ask podcast are out every Monday and Friday, available wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube.